A forbidden ritual fuses ancient magic with stolen modern science, resurrecting the long-dead Orc King in a hidden American forest. His colossal army awakens, armed not just with axes, but with weapons infused by corrupted technology. Cities fall in hours, governments scramble, and heroes, ordinary and extraordinary, rise from chaos. Science and sorcery collide as America becomes the battleground for the world's survival. At the heart of it all, a chosen few must face the Orc King before the invasion consumes the globe. The forest was not on any map. Hidden in the mountains of Wyoming, its trees were older than history, their roots curling around stones engraved with symbols no scholar had ever translated. Locals whispered about lights, chants, and the occasional animal found torn open at dawn. Most ignored the rumors. America had bigger problems: politics, wars overseas, and a swelling storm of scientific breakthroughs too fast for governments to regulate. But on a moonless night, everything changed. Deep in the heart of that forest, a man in a black hood lit a ring of torches. His name was Dr. Elijah Crane, once a government scientist, now a fugitive. He believed humanity had reached its limit with science alone. To control the future, he needed power that broke the laws of physics. He had discovered an ancient codex that spoke of an Orc King who had once commanded an army large enough to drown nations. The book claimed he could be resurrected if two forces, raw magic and advanced science, were bound together. Crane placed a crystal the size of a football into the center of a stone altar. The crystal wasn't natural. It was grown in a lab, pulsing with stolen nuclear energy. Around it, he scattered bones pulled from the earth, huge rib cages and tusked skulls that had lain buried for centuries. His voice echoed as he began to chant, not Latin, not any human tongue, but the harsh syllables of the codex. Each word made the air ripple. Each word made the earth groan. Then the ground split. A colossal hand, gray-skinned and armored in bone, clawed upward. Dirt exploded. A roar shattered the silence. Not human, but ancient and endless. The Orc King rose, standing 12 feet tall, eyes glowing green with fire. His chest was scarred, his tusks jagged, his presence overwhelming. The bones around the altar began to shake, then fly into the air, reassembling into armored warriors. One after another, the orcs came alive. Hundreds, then thousands, their bodies thick with muscle, their weapons forged from both steel and something darker. Crane lifted his hands, triumphant. "My king," he shouted, "the world is yours to conquer. I give you America as your throne." The Orc King's gaze burned like wildfire. His voice thundered in broken English, reshaped by Crane's science. "Then we march. We claim blood. We rule." By dawn, the forest was empty. Only the smoking crater of the altar remained. News broke the next day, but no one understood the scale. Reports came in of missing towns in Wyoming. Entire highways swallowed in landslides. Surveillance drones went dark. By the time the National Guard arrived, the Orc horde had already moved east, cutting through rural America like a storm. A convoy of armored vehicles rolled down a deserted highway. Lieutenant Sarah Blake, a combat veteran with a reputation for refusing orders when lives were on the line, scanned a tree line through her night vision scope. Her unit was supposed to investigate possible terrorist activity. What they found instead were shapes too big, too fast, tearing through the forest. "Eyes up!" Blake shouted. An orc the size of a truck leapt onto the lead vehicle, smashing its roof with a war hammer that crackled with strange blue energy. Sparks erupted. Soldiers screamed. Automatic rifles opened fire, bullets punching into gray flesh, but the creature didn't fall. Behind it, dozens more charged, roaring, axes glowing with green flames born of Crane's fusion of magic and technology. The convoy turned into chaos. Explosions lit up the highway. Helicopters swooped in, only to be ripped down by spears that burned like missiles. The orcs fought with a savagery no soldier had trained for. Blake emptied her rifle into one, then pulled her sidearm, shouting for her men to retreat. But retreat was impossible. The horde was everywhere. In 30 minutes, the convoy was gone. What remained were burning vehicles and silence. Only Blake survived, dragged out of the wreckage by sheer luck. When she looked up, she saw the Orc King himself, mounted on a white war beast that looked like a bear crossed with a wolf. His eyes locked on her. He raised his sword, not to kill, but to mark her. Then he rode off with his army. By the time his story hit national headlines, America was in panic. Viral footage from terrified civilians showed giants tearing through small towns. Hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag Orc Invasion. Hashtag Dark Army. Hashtag America Under Siege. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was a government experiment gone wrong. Others said it was aliens. Only Crane knew the truth. It was magic, reforged by science. The president called for immediate action. Fighter jets scrambled, armored divisions rolled across the plains, and scientists scrambled to study the strange energy signatures left behind. But the Orcs were unstoppable. They didn't just destroy, they recruited. Each battlefield became a resurrection ground, where fallen bones rose to join the horde. Blake, recovering in a field hospital, knew one thing. This was not a war America could fight with guns alone. The Orc King had let her live for a reason. She didn't know why, but she intended to find out. Meanwhile, Crane watched from a hidden command post built under the Rockies. Screens flickered with satellite images of burning towns. He smiled as America crumbled. For him, this was only the beginning. With the Orc King under his guidance, the invasion would spread across the globe. Nations would fall. Humanity would kneel. But deep inside the Orc King's mind, a different plan brewed. He had risen from the grave once, and he did not intend to serve a human for long. Science had been useful in his resurrection, but the Orcs were creatures of conquest. Soon, the king would take control, and Dr. Crane would discover what it meant to betray both magic and mankind. The invasion had begun. Smoke rose over Kansas like a storm cloud. The Orc horde had swept across the plains in less than 48 hours, crushing everything in their path. Entire towns vanished overnight. Power grids failed. Highways burned. What America thought was a domestic crisis had now become a national war. In the Pentagon, generals argued over maps. Drones showed thousands of Orc warriors moving east in tight formations, guided by discipline that rivaled modern armies. At their head rode the Orc King on his monstrous white war beast, his sword glowing with runes that disrupted radio signals for miles. He wasn't just a warlord, he was a living weapon. President Reeves slammed his fist on the table. We need a miracle, not excuses. If this horde reaches the Mississippi, half the country is gone. But no miracle came. On the ground, Lieutenant Sarah Blake was back in the fight. Her convoy massacre had gone viral, turning her into the soldier who had looked the Orc King in the eye and lived. Now she was stationed with a joint task force in Missouri, preparing to block the invasion. Tanks lined up across farmlands, fighter jets screamed overhead, and hundreds of soldiers dug in for the biggest ground battle on American soil since the Civil War. Blake checked her gear. Her unit was terrified, but she stood calm, focused. She couldn't forget the king's stare, how he had spared her. The question haunted her. Why me? The answer came sooner than she expected. The ground shook. The horizon turned black with marching orcs. They came in waves, chanting in a language that seemed to tear at the sky. The tanks opened fire. Explosions ripped through the front lines, tossing bodies into the air. Jet fighters dove, unleashing missiles. For a moment, it looked like victory. Orcs fell by the hundreds. Smoke and fire filled the fields. Then the impossible happened. The Orc King raised his sword. The air cracked like glass. From the soil rose more warriors, reanimated by a fusion of necromancy and radiation. Every orc that fell stood back up, stronger, angrier, their weapons glowing brighter. American soldiers watched in horror as their kills came back to life. Keep firing, Blake shouted, unloading round after round. But it was no use. The horde pushed forward, unstoppable. Tanks were flipped like toys. Jets were shot out of the sky by energy-charged spears. In less than 2 hours, the American line collapsed. Thousands were dead or missing. Missouri was gone. Far away, In his hidden bunker, Dr. Crane watched the battle unfold on a wall of screens. He whispered with glee as the Orc King's power grew. Yet part of him feared what he saw. The king was evolving, no longer listening to his guidance. "Careful, my creation," Crane muttered. "You may think you rule, but without me, you are nothing." The Orc King, miles away, seemed to hear. He turned his head toward an invisible horizon, tusks curling in a grin. By nightfall, the horde reached the edge of St. Louis. Civilians fled in every direction. Highways turned into rivers of cars. Chaos ruled the city. Blake and her scattered survivors regrouped in the ruins of an overpass. Bloodied, exhausted, and outnumbered, they faced the truth. This was not just war. This was the end of civilization. Blake raised her radio. "Command, this is Lieutenant Blake. We've lost Missouri. I repeat, we've lost Missouri. If you don't stop them here, they'll reach Washington in days." Static answered. Then a voice cut through. "Lieutenant Blake, hold your position. Reinforcements are on the way. Not soldiers. Something else." Before she could ask what that meant, the night sky split open with light. A new force arrived, not military, not magic, something in between. And the war for America took its next step. The night sky over St. Louis burned red. Skyscrapers collapsed under the weight of orc war beasts. Bridges cracked as hordes thundered across. Civilians screamed in the streets, trapped between fire and steel. The U.S. military had fallen back, bleeding, broken. Everyone expected total collapse until the light arrived. From the horizon came a formation of sleek aircraft unlike any known fighter jets. They moved in perfect silence, faster than sound, leaving trails of blue fire. At their center hovered a massive black carrier that shimmered like it was half machine, half alive. Lieutenant Sarah Blake stared upward. "What in God's name is that?" Her radio crackled. A voice answered, "Not God, Lieutenant. Science. Reinvented." The carrier opened, releasing figures into the battlefield. Not soldiers, prototypes. Men and women enhanced with experimental biotech, their armor glowing with circuits, their bodies augmented with energy cores designed in secret labs. They weren't supposed to exist, but desperation had forced the government to unleash them. The world would know them soon by a single name, the Vanguard. They hit the streets like falling stars. One tore through an orc squad with plasma blades. Another raised her hands and unleashed waves of compressed sonic blasts, shattering weapons and bones alike. The Vanguard fought with precision and fury, turning the tide for the first time since the invasion began. Blake watched in awe, but she knew victory wouldn't come easy. At the city center, the Orc King rode his monstrous white war beast, sword glowing brighter than ever. His roar silenced both armies. With a single swing, he cleaved through a collapsing tower, sending rubble crashing onto the battlefield. The Vanguard charged him. The king laughed. Dr. Crane watched from his bunker, furious. They weren't supposed to be deployed yet. "The Vanguard are mine." He slammed his fist against the console. "Do you hear me, King? They're mine to command." But the Orc King ignored him. The king had no master. He saw the Vanguard not as threats, but as challengers worthy of his blade. The battle escalated. Plasma blasts clashed with enchanted steel. Orc necromancy collided with human biotech. St. Louis became a war zone lit by fire and lightning. Blake fought beside the Vanguard, unloading every bullet she had. She noticed something no one else did. The orcs seemed to hesitate when the king focused on her. Again, he spared her life, his eyes glowing with a strange recognition. "Why me?" she whispered, ducking behind rubble. The answer was lost in the chaos. Hours passed, and St. Louis was half in ruins. But for the first time, the orcs slowed. The Vanguard had bought precious ground, forcing the horde to retreat across the river. Still, it was no true victory. The king raised a sword in salute before pulling back, leaving the city burning but alive. The people of America cheered when the footage went viral. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Vanguard versus Orcs. Hashtag America fights back. Hashtag War for Humanity. But behind the screens, leaders knew the truth. The Orc King hadn't been defeated. He was testing them, and he was only getting stronger. In the ruins of the city, Blake stood with the surviving vanguard. Their leader, a tall man with cybernetic eyes, approached her. "You survived twice against the king," he said. "That's no accident. He's marked you." Blake frowned. "Marked me for what?" The man didn't answer. He only looked toward the horizon, where the orc horde regrouped in the distance. The next battle wasn't days away. It was already coming. The Mississippi River had always been a symbol of America's heart, but now it was a front line. On one side, the battered U.S. military and the vanguard dug in with everything left: artillery, drones, cyber augments. On the other, the Orc King and his endless horde gathered in black waves, their war chants shaking the ground. It wasn't just numbers. Each day, their weapons grew stranger. Orc blades now sparked with stolen human tech, rifle barrels fused into axes, grenades wired into shields. Crane's twisted fusion of science and sorcery was evolving faster than America could adapt. From her command tent, Lieutenant Sarah Blake studied the battle maps. St. Louis had been saved, barely, but it was only a delay. If the Orcs crossed the Mississippi, nothing would stop them from reaching Washington. The vanguard leader, the man with cybernetic eyes known only as Orion, stood beside her. "The king isn't attacking yet," he said. "He's waiting, watching, testing you." Blake clenched her fists. "Why me?" Orion finally gave the answer she dreaded. "Because he thinks you're one of his." The next dawn, the river war began. The sky filled with drones, jets, and missiles, the air buzzing like a swarm of hornets. Tanks thundered across levees. Soldiers lined the banks, firing relentlessly. Across the water, the orcs charged. Their monstrous siege engines rolled forward, giant towers of bone and steel that belched green fire. The river boiled with bodies as the first wave tried to swim across. Artillery lit up the banks, tearing apart the front lines. For a heartbeat, America cheered. Then the Orc King raised his sword. The river itself split, water churning upward as if gravity had shattered. Orc warriors surged across the exposed riverbed, unstoppable, roaring like gods of war. "Hold the line," Blake shouted, racing to the front with her rifle. The vanguard charged beside her, a storm of plasma, sonic blasts, and enhanced fury. The clash was apocalyptic. Plasma fire met necromantic shields. Orc beasts crushed armored vehicles. Soldiers were dragged, screaming, into the chaos. Blake fought like a machine, adrenaline burning her veins, but every time the king's eyes found her across the battlefield, she felt a pull, as if he were summoning her. Far underground, Dr. Crane monitored the war through his bunker screens. His face dripped sweat as he realized the truth. The king no longer needed him. "He's breaking free," Crane whispered. "I gave him life, and now he'll take mine." He reached for a fail-safe device, a core of unstable energy. "If the king betrays me, I'll end us both." But Crane didn't realize he was already too late. Back on the battlefield, the fight reached its breaking point. The Orc King rode his monstrous war beast straight into American lines, his sword cutting tanks in half with a single swing. Orion leapt to meet him, plasma blade sparking. Their clash sent shockwaves across the river. Blake charged forward, firing, but the king's gaze froze her. He dismounted, towering over her, tusks gleaming, and raised his weapon. Soldiers aimed their guns, but he didn't strike. Instead, he pressed the tip of his blade to her chest, not piercing, only marking. In a guttural voice, he growled, "You are mine." The battlefield seemed to freeze. The orc horde roared in triumph. Blake gasped, rage and fear twisting inside her. She fired point-blank into his chest. The bullets staggered him, but he laughed, retreating into the chaos. The message was clear. He could have killed her. He didn't. By nightfall, both armies were shattered. The Mississippi ran red with blood. Neither side had won, but the world had changed. News broadcasts declared the battle a stalemate. Social media erupted. Hashtag Mississippi Massacre. Hashtag Orc King. Hashtag Blake Marked. For the first time, humanity realized this wasn't just war. It was something personal. And deep underground, Dr. Crane activated his failsafe. The core hummed with catastrophic energy. He whispered, "If I can't control him, I'll destroy him." But the York King already knew, and he was coming. The Mississippi battlefield still smoked when the final chapter began. Both armies had bled, both had retreated, but the war was far from over. Deep beneath the Rockies, Dr. Crane prepared his failsafe, a pulsing energy core built to annihilate the Orc King and his horde in one detonation. "This is my world," Crane muttered, fingers trembling over the trigger. Not his. But before he could activate it, the walls of his bunker shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. A roar thundered through the tunnels. The York King had come for him. The steel blast doors ripped open like paper. The king stepped inside, armor cracked, tusks bloodied, eyes burning with emerald fire. He towered over Crane, who clutched the core like a lifeline. "I gave you life," Crane screamed. "You belong to me." The king grinned, tusks glinting. "No, you belong to death." With one swing, he split Crane in two. The core tumbled from his hands, glowing hotter, unstable. Miles away, Lieutenant Sarah Blake jolted as alarms blared across military comms. Satellites detected an energy surge under the Rockies. The failsafe was going critical. If it detonated, half the country would be vaporized. Without hesitation, she boarded a Vanguard transport. Orion and his enhanced fighters followed. They dove into the mountains just as the core reached meltdown. In the depths, they found the king standing over Crane's body, the unstable device pulsing like a sun. Blake raised her rifle. "This ends now." The king turned, sword blazing. "Yes, it ends with you." The final battle was chaos in a cage of stone. Vanguard plasma clashed with the king's corrupted magic. The walls collapsed, fire streaked the tunnels, and the core's light grew unbearable. Blake fought her way to the device, dodging the king's strikes, each blow shaking the mountain. Orion was thrown aside. Soldiers burned. Only Blake remained standing between the king and the core. The king loomed over her, laughing. "You are marked. Join me. Rule at my side." Blake's answer was a bullet to his eye. Then she slammed the failsafe into overload. A blast of light swallowed the chamber. Days later, America watched the footage in silence. The Rockies still smoked, a crater where the bunker once stood. The Orc horde, leaderless, scattered back into the forests. The invasion had ended, not with victory, but survival. Blake was pulled from the wreckage, barely alive. Reporters called her the soldier who saved the nation. Hashtags immortalized her. Hashtag Blake the Unbroken. Hashtag End of the King. But in the shadows, rumors spread. Some claimed they saw a massive figure limping from the crater, eyes still glowing green. The York King might not be dead, and if he still lived, the war had only just begun.